And yes, as far as the court art is concerned, this court art is actually taking its form, very vivid form it is taking when you talk about the time period of Ashoka. Ashoka was actually teaching the people the value of the social ethics. That is why Ashokan Dhamma is not considered as a religious document, but Ashokan Dhamma is considered as a document containing some ethical codes. In this class, I will be focusing on the Mauryan architecture. But before we proceed on to the Mauryan architecture, let me brief you something about the Mauryan art and architecture. That Mauryan architecture can be divided into two forms, can be divided into two broad factions. For example, the first faction of Mauryan architecture is the one which was handled and which was, I would say, supported by the court, and the second form of architecture is very famous and other than the court, means all those architectural and the art details which were being followed in the Mauryan dynasty. And as we study about the Mauryan art and architectural period, and especially about the architecture of the Mauryans, the starting architecture of the Mauryans means during the Chandragupta time and in whole of the Mauryan dynasty, one thing which we have noticed is the use of perishable material in the construction of these monuments. However, it is only after the decline of the Mauryans and the start of the post-Mauryan period when you have some strong building material in order to construct your monuments. The major material which was being used during Mauryan times in the construction of art or in the construction of great architectural monuments, that is wood. According to Megasthenes and all the travelers who were traveling India during these phases, they have described about the palace of Pataliputra, they have described about the palace of Ashoka, and in every detail which they are mentioning in this time period, they are just focusing on the use of perishable material, that is wood, in the construction of your great monuments. And this is the reason why we have not found any I would say great evidences, and that is why these monuments are not means they are not surviving till date. Although when we try to excavate the grounds based on the informations mentioned by these travelers that where these monuments used to be, we have found some evidences which proves that yes, there was a palace of Pataliputra during Chandragupta Mauryan time period and the Ashokas. So I will be taking you to the slides where I will be discussing each and every aspect of Mauryan architecture very widely. First of all, as far as the court architecture of the Mauryans is concerned, I will be taking you to understand the court and the monuments, the palaces which were being constructed during their time period, because I am talking about the court art. And the court architecture is very much important from your prelim point of view, because non-imperial architecture, we do not have various or rich evidences to prove it. That is why we do not say that it is an important part as far as Mauryan architecture is concerned. And yes, as far as the court art is concerned, this court art is actually taking its form, very vivid form it is taking when you talk about the time period of Ashoka, because it is by Ashoka, learning from his Persian and the Achaemenid rulers, Ashoka started copying their, I would say, their method of communicating with the people with the help of inscribing some inscriptions in the form of rock edicts and the pillar edicts. Ashoka is also the one who not only inscribed these pillar edicts and the rock edicts, but he also took the construction of various stupas as far as Buddhism and Dhamma, which was propagated by Ashoka, is concerned. And these are some architectural monuments of Ashokan time period, and yes, Mauryan art, Mauryan architecture, which I will be focusing in the class. So as the first slide is saying before you that Mauryan art and architecture can be vividly placed between two major headings, that is first the court art, means that art which is supported by the court, means by the kings, and the other one is the popular art, means the individual art or individual initiative. However, we do not find any evidence or any great evidence of the popular art, but as far as popular art is concerned, caves are very much important. Caves are very much important, but if you talk about the court art, they are even more important as far as civil services examination prelims are concerned, because every year we are facing the questions from Mauryan court architecture. That is why we need to cover this topic in details. As you can see, Mauryan court art implies architectural works in the form of pillars, stupas and palaces. So pillars, stupas and palaces will be taught to you in details about every other thing, every important thing which you need to know when you are studying about these three things. They are commissioned by Mauryan rulers for political as well as for the religious reasons. Because if you see the construction of stupas, according to various historians, Mauryan stupas, mean the stupas which were being constructed during Mauryans, they had some religious significance. When you study about Dhamma also, when you study about Dhamma, some people say that, and some historians were putting forward their view that Ashokan, I would say Dhamma, Ashokan Dhamma, and by following Dhamma, Ashoka was trying to propagate Buddhism. He was trying to propagate Buddhism only. But this fact is actually wrong, because when you study the details, the contents of Dhamma, Ashoka has proclaimed one thing, very important thing in every edict which he is inscribing, every edict which is being placed in the important parts of his country. He is saying that one should always respect Brahmanas and Shramanas. And when the king himself is proclaiming that one should always respect Brahmanas and Shramanas, what does it mean? It means that Ashoka was not trying to propagate Buddhism as a state religion, but Ashoka was actually doing the work. Ashoka was actually teaching the people the value of the social ethics. That is why Ashokan Dhamma is not considered as a religious document, but Ashokan Dhamma is considered as a document containing some ethical codes and the codes of conduct, that what you should do, how you should do, and what should be respected, and how should be your behavior as far as the elders and the state is concerned. Ashoka has repeatedly written in all of his inscriptions that one should always abstain from killing animals. One should always not only abstain from killing animals, but also he should not be showing any interest in violence. And that is why Ashoka himself gave the practice, and I would say left the practice of winning over the lands with the help of military. But Romila Thapar, as I told you in my very previous class, Romila Thapar, taking this as a point, she says that Ashoka is adopting Dhamma at that point of his life when when the Mauryan dynasty is actually standing at its zenith. Mauryan dynasty was actually so vast, and that is why every important trading point and the center was already in the boundaries of the Mauryan dynasty, and there was no other place that should be captured. Because if you talk about the deep south, the inscriptional records, they specify that Mauryan rulers were on very friendly term as far as the rulers of Sri Lanka and deep south, means Cholas and Pandyas, are concerned. That is why they did not feel the need of capturing these lands. Ashoka himself said that one should always win over the lands with the help of the propagation of Dhamma. And in this way, he sent various missionaries. One very good example of it, when Ashoka sent his daughter Sangamitra and his son Mahindra to Sri Lanka. However, these missionaries are considered as Buddhist missionaries. Ashoka himself was a Buddhist, though Ashoka did not adopt Buddhism at the very early stage of his life. Ashoka is actually following Buddhism in or towards I would say just after the Kalinga. There is one inscription which is also saying the personal reviews of this king. There is some inscription which is asking and which is actually specifying Ashoka's personal relation with Buddhism, but it is also specifying in details. And as far as the contents of Dhamma are concerned, the content of Dhamma is concerned, the historians point out nowadays historians point out very vividly that Ashoka, though personally he was a great follower of Buddhism, but as far as the state policies were concerned, Ashoka never tried to project Buddhism as the state religion. And that is why, according to various historians, Ashokan Dhamma can be projected as compilation of ethical codes as far as Buddhism and Brahmanism is concerned. Ashoka just took out the good things out of these religions. He just put forward all these good things in a single document. This is what Dhamma was. And this is because of this Dhamma, this is because of the adoption of Dhamma, that various architectural details and architectural works are actually happening at this point of time, which you need to study with me in this very article. As far as the palaces are concerned, I told you the travelers are mentioning about the details of palaces. Not only the details of palaces they are mentioning, but the travelers are also saying that these palaces during Mauryans were being constructed with the help of perishable material, that is wood. And this is the reason why, my dear students, these palaces, they don't survive now. But when you excavate the grounds, when you excavate the location which has been mentioned in the records of these foreign travelers, you find some evidences which prove that whatever these writers are writing, however, it seems to be true. But Megasthenes is saying that the city of Pataliputra is actually very splendid, so big, and however all these things, they seem to be exaggerated, because when we start excavating these things, these details which are mentioned by Megasthenes, they do not seem to be correct. That is why they are mere exaggeration. But we are not familiar and we are not interested at this point of time that whether these details are exaggerated in their accounts or not, but we are more interested with the I would say with the fact that whatever they are mentioning in their records, whether it is true or not. So as far as palaces are concerned, the very first segment of the court art of Mauryans, Megasthenes described the palaces of the Mauryan Empire as one of the greatest creation of the mankind, and even the Chinese traveler Fahan called Mauryan palaces as God-gifted monuments. UPSC asked this question in 2017 CSC prelims. This is very much important. UPSC asked this question in the statement by thing where UPSC mentioned that the Mauryan palaces were the gift of the gods, has been mentioned by Megasthenes in his account called Indica, and students were confused because Megasthenes is the one who is talking in details about Pataliputra, and that is why students thought as if the details mentioned by Megasthenes could be correct. And that is why it is the Megasthenes who mentioned the Pataliputra and all other palaces of the Mauryans as to be the god gift. But no, Fahan, a Chinese traveler, is remarking this. And with this remark, you should not take these remarks literally, but being from, and if you watch these things from the eyes of a historian, we try to acknowledge just one thing. When someone is writing such big things, one thing which comes to our mind is economic prosperity of Mauryans, and you all know it very well. You all know it very well that not only economically but also politically Mauryans were very prosperous. I told you the reasons why Magad emerged as the center of India during Mauryans, and that is why palaces to be very much splendid, palaces to be the center of the politics, it is very much but natural, because you are not only economically prosperous but politically also you are very much strong. As far as Persian influence is concerned, the palaces of Chandragupta Maurya was inspired by Achaemenid palaces at Persepolis in Iran. And when I am saying that Achaemenid palaces at Persepolis in Iran, they have some influence over the work of Chandragupta Maurya and the palace construction of India during Mauryans. Why I am saying it? Because the palaces constructed under Persians, they were also using the perishable material like wood, and the same perishable material is also being used by the Mauryan rulers, which say that or which specify one thing very clearly, as the similarity of the material for construction of palaces is very much similar, and we all know very well that Ashoka too hired the practice of inscribing these inscriptions or to directly communicate with the subject of his empire with the help of these edicts by only from these Persians. So Persian influence, this angle of Persian influence on India during Mauryans, even when you talk about Chandragupta Maurya, cannot be rejected. So the Persian influence here is the material used for the construction of palaces. As I have mentioned, wood was principal building material during Mauryan Empire, and it was a perishable material. Examples, for example, the Mauryan capital at Pataliputra, the Ashoka's palace at Kumrahar, and Chandragupta Maurya's palace, all these are the examples of Mauryan palaces constructed under these great kings of Mauryas.